Welcome, everyone. I'm Dawn Matheny, and I'm the Executive Director of Veriditas. We're delighted you joined us today and excited about the upcoming conversation between Lauren Artress and Diana Butler Bass. I would like to introduce Lauren Artress just briefly. Um, Lauren began her work with the Labyrinth while she was a priest at Grace Cathedral. And her whole story is quite wonderful, and you can read about it in Walking a Sacred Path and her latest book on the Holy Fool. She began by starting a program called Quest at Grace Cathedral, exploring spirituality in this new era of ours. And that led to the Labyrinth, and Lauren is known for reintroducing the Labyrinth to the Western world. And it started at the Episcopal Church of Grace and then spun off, and Veriditas became its own nonprofit in 1995. And I've had the pleasure of supporting her since 2007. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Lauren.
Thank you, Dawn. Thanks. Thanks, everyone, for being here. It's wonderful that we can meet this way and discuss and introduce more about what we're doing over in Chartres Cathedral. And we're delighted to have Diana Butler Bass join us, for sure. What a privilege. And Diana, you're under such demand right now. We're really honored you'd want to come to Chartres. Let me briefly introduce you, Diana, formally by what's partially on your website. Diana Butler Bass is an award-winning author, popular speaker, inspiring preacher, and one of America's most trusted commentators on religion and contemporary spirituality. Her passion is sharing great ideas to change the lives and the world, a passion that ranges from informing the public about spiritual trends, challenging conventional narratives about religious practice, entering the fray of social media with spiritual wisdom and smart theology, and writing books to help readers see themselves, their place in history, and seeing God differently. She does this all with intelligence and joy and a good dose of humor. She holds a doctorate in religious studies from Duke University and is author of 11 books. My favorites, Diana, are Grounded and Christianity After Religion. I really find a great deal of camaraderie there. Her latest book is Freeing Jesus. Diana's received numerous awards, including the Welber Awards for the Best Nonfiction Book of the Year. Her Substack, which I love, The Cottage, is educating and nourishing people around the world. So, welcome, Diana.
It's really good to be with you. And it's so interesting that you would say that Grounded and Christianity After Religion are your favorites, because authors are not supposed to have favorites, but those are my favorites. And there's something that was just really bubbling up in me in that period. Christianity After Religion was published in 2012 and Grounded in 2015. And in some ways, that sort of middle section of my writing, I think everything sort of springs out both directions, both the former books and then to the future work that I do. But so much of it is in the pages of those two books in some form or another. So it just really pleases me that you said that, and we didn't plan it at all.
No, we didn't plan it. Well, I think that's where we meet. I think that's where our work meets with this awakening. You even have another book called The Great Awakening. But the whole sense of a spiritual, yes, revolution because of the amount of spiritual hunger that's in our churches. And, in various ways, we're trying to either fix it and help bring nourishment into the churches, or we're also some of us disappointed and hurt by the church. And then there's others of us who've just given up, and it's the kind of broad spectrum. And so those two books really really touched me for sure. And you start grounded with a Labyrinth experience.
Yes, I did. I've written about the labyrinth in many of my books, actually. Grounded starts at a labyrinth in Santa Barbara, California, when I was visiting a monastery. But several of the other books that I've written also have labyrinth stories. There was a different labyrinth at another place, another monastery in Santa Barbara, and that shows up in a book. The labyrinth in oh gosh, I think it was Ely Cathedral in England, which is a square labyrinth, shows up in one of my early books as well. But the idea of a walking path has been a really powerful metaphor for me to draw off of, to talk about spiritual journey. Also, I've just had a lot of very powerful experiences on labyrinths through the
Mhm.
years. And so when I'm writing from a more memoir genre, it's not unusual at all for me to pull on one of those different experiences and
Sure.
to invite my readers into a moment of epiphany or deeper understanding for me.
Can you share one of those experiences?
One of the really powerful ones happened at Mount Calvary Monastery in Santa Barbara, a monastery that was lost in a fire
Mhm.
several years ago. And they had a beautiful labyrinth up there. And I had been through a very long, difficult period of my life. I believe this is in Freeing Jesus, where I had gotten out of graduate school, had my first job, lost my first job, gotten divorced, um, was a single person in my 30s, gotten remarried, and gotten pregnant. And all of that happened in about a 6 year period.
Oh,
And while I was going through this, just sort of these amazing life transitions in a very short period of time, I was also going through theological changes, very deep reorientation of my spiritual life. So I was about 3 months pregnant, and I was walking the labyrinth at Mount Calvary. And this is, in Southern California. I believe it was May, so it's not like the rainy season. And I was up there with a few other people, some of whom I think you know. I believe that Nora Gallagher, who is another writer,
mhm.
California spiritual writer, she was up there. Some people from a church in Santa Barbara that have been very active in Labyrinth community over the years. We were all walking the labyrinth together. And so here I was, very pregnant, with all these beautiful friends who had helped me through these long and difficult transitions, these women who were very excited that I was going to be having a baby. I was almost 40 at this point, and it started to rain.
That is unusual.
Yeah, and it was just there was
Uh-huh.
something that was so life-giving about that. Is that
Mhm.
this gentle rain was falling on all of us, and there I was, very pregnant, and we were walking the labyrinth together, and I'm really getting chills just even remembering how it felt that day, that the earth was wet
Mhm. Mhm.
with life.
Yes, yeah.
And 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 someone commented on it. I believe that it might have been Nora, saying something about how much that moment had meant to her too, seeing me, her younger friend, pregnant, walking, and this light, beautiful rain falling on us so unexpectedly up on this mountaintop in Santa Barbara as we all walked the sacred path together. And so, yeah, that was one of the moments that made it into a book.
That's lovely. That's lovely. And that's one of the things, not only the unusualness of rain in May, usually ends in April, as you probably know, but the sense that each labyrinth walk is different. And the environment means a lot, the labyrinth means a lot, anything that's different. But each time, I think every time someone walks the labyrinth, it teaches us more how to, what I would say, drop in. Drop into that contemplative space inside. And like you say, and grounded, here you're walking the labyrinth and it's very busy and there's children cheering on their team and there's people walking and there's cars going by. And it allows you to drop into that place that every one of us has. And if we don't have it, we're trying to locate it. The contemplative, as John O'Donohue would say, the eternal inside. So we're delighted that you're joining us for our pilgrimage in Chartres. And I'd like to say a little bit more about that because this is your first time too, which, so we'll give a little bit of overview of the program. Because again, that meeting place of people seeking some kind of spiritual sustenance and anchoring that it feels missing from a lot of our churches in the West, for sure. And so we've been doing these pilgrimages since 1998. I've been going to Chartres Cathedral since 91. That's when we moved the chairs and kind of it was chaotic and everything, but there were 6 of us that moved the chairs from the labyrinth. It just felt like it came alive. It just started to there was just a sense of joy and that it's sort of being rediscovered. It had been probably closed, as you may know, since probably, we guess, since the French Revolution, so 1792. When these great cathedrals became houses of reason, temples of reason. There's lots of history here, Diana. It's wonderful. I can't wait for you to be there. So we've been doing these pilgrimages since 98 and welcoming people. People arrive under their own steam and all of that. And if there's questions about the program, we'll answer those later on. So the sense of being able to nourish people and being able to have people in the site of this great Chartres Cathedral that dates back earlier. There was actually 4 cathedrals on that place before they discovered this quarry about 5 kilometers away for stone. And so the first stone one was built in 1148. And so our purpose of going there is to gather community and help nourish our souls and to learn to pray the labyrinth and other spiritual practices. And really to deepen our roots in the spiritual tradition. So just simply glimpses of Chartres, and a lot of these are artistic renderings. You can see the cathedral from miles off. And if you're coming down on the plain, we always tell people that's about 8 miles away. And you can see this is actually a pilgrimage coming through the wheat fields to the cathedral. And so there's a couple pictures of different pilgrimages here because this is a huge and really medieval and ancient pilgrimage site. So I often use this quote, maybe you know it, Diana, from Richard Niebuhr. Pilgrims are people in motion, moving through territories not their own, seeking something we might call completion, or perhaps the word clarity will do just as well, a goal for which only the spirit's compass can point the way. I love that phrase, spirit's compass, because I think many people come to our programs in Chartres because they're not quite clear what their spiritual compass is pointing toward. And it's often found out there quite dramatically sometimes.
That's a great quote. I did not know that one from Niebuhr.
Yeah. And he I'm not sure what book that is in, but it's a wonderful quote because it is the territory we're moving is not our own for sure. This is just an orientation here, Paris, and you can see the red dot where Chartres is there, and then the city of Chartres, the central village with the cathedral there. And here we kind of have a couple slides from different times. This is the model in 1194. Now there's 2 huge towers, and then just a graphic about what it must have been to build the cathedral. And of course, we're not sure when the labyrinth was put in. There's 2 theories. One is a kind of a template that was put in early, so it directed the rest of the sacred geometry for the cathedral. Other people feel came in much later, after the roof was put on. We really don't know. And unfortunately, unless, of course, someone like you who have such great expertise in digging up records can help us find records, probably in the Vatican, about when it was put in, we really don't know. And this is Chartres Cathedral, again from another angle. It's surrounded by a river, the Loire River. And the river is what allowed them to bring these tonnage of stones from the quarry 5 kilometers away to the cathedral site. There's some wonderful stories about that. It was also drawn by carriage and, carts. And there's a wonderful write-up from Karen Armstrong in her Holy Wars book about the building of Chartres. And the rich people and the poor people were all helping build this cathedral that you're now seeing on your screen. There's a then and now. So Lars has put this together wonderfully. So in the early times, that's where you'd see it. Here again, the south and the north. And folks, at Chartres Cathedral is one of the finest collections of stained glass windows, beautifully done. And you'll see these there. Our Lady Belvière, Notre Dame de Belvière, is one of the oldest windows. It was saved from the fire in 1194. And it is one of the most honored pieces there. So, Our Lady of the Pillar, gosh, Diana, there's a very interesting discussion about this, because in about 4 years ago, they lightened her skin.
Oh.
She was a black Madonna, actually. And they're saying from the 16th century, this is what she looked like. So there's lots to dive in here if you're interested, if you happen to be interested in history. And this is the veil of Notre Dame is understood to be and has been carbon dated from the 1st century. And so this, as legend has it, was the veil that Mary was wearing when Jesus was birthed. Or there's a second legend that she was wearing it when the Annunciation happened. So this is on display. You'll see all these things in the cathedral. It's quite fascinating. And we're only just showing you a little bit. Notre Dame, this is in the crypt of the cathedral. And this is considered a dark Madonna, not a black Madonna, because of the date. It was the original one, the Black Madonna, was destroyed in the French Revolution. Literally hacked to pieces in the front of the cathedral. And somebody sat down and wrote this description, detail by detail. And then this was reproduced. And here's the labyrinth. And again, people don't know why this labyrinth was put in the floor. And again, the officials of Chartres are unhappy with it being there. They're getting used to it slowly. This is the whole sense of, what was this there for? You see, there's many theories, none of which are talked about. And it's just beautifully done. Sometimes people have this feeling like it's etched into the floor, just a little etching. No, this is heavy duty, beautiful stonework. And this is a 1750 lithograph. That dates and shows that people walk the labyrinth. And you understand in the back, you can see a rood screen there, which is removed later, and then is the choir. And of course, the choir is where the bishops and well, not always kings, but the courts and the esquires and all the important people were up there. And then the labyrinth is really a, quote, as we might say today, a layperson's tool. A layperson's tool. This is the cathedral here, and this is when I went there in our little group in 1991. This is what it looked like, folks. 256 chairs. Some of them bound together in those days, some not. This is the center of the labyrinth, and that's not the only, but Chartres Cathedral has not suffered a lot of war damage. But the center of the labyrinth was pulled up to make cannonballs in the French Revolution. So
you can really see the stonework there.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
It's 800 years old, you know. And this is open on a Friday. We have a private evening in the labyrinth like this. Here we're setting up for a wonderful event that also happens in June, a Meeting Mary. Judith Tripp leads this, and if she is with us, we can speak about that later. But here we are on this amazing labyrinth. And the cathedral has recently been redone, so it looks nice and fresh and all, and it's taken years, of course. So, yeah. Oh, and there's amazing light shows at night.
Oh.
And this has been going on for a number of years, right on the front of the cathedral, but also the left here shows that there's something like 22 different places of lights and light shows around the city of Chartres every night, and I think of every year. And this is one of them. What they did historically is they looked at the original colors that they discovered when they were cleaning the cathedral. And then they put the template on a light template. And so they're casting this light. But this, as I understand it, is what the cathedral used to look like. This is the jeweled city of Jerusalem, right out of Revelations 12. And here we are again from the back, and this building there with the dark roof, that's our retreat center. It's about a minute and a half walk from the cathedral. And that's the open gate, and inside there, it used to be an old monastery. Guess what? It was actually a diocesan monastery. And here we are in the breakfast room in the upper right, and in our classroom in the lower left. That's a training. We're doing a facilitator training also in June when folks are there. And then just a hallway down, really a lovely place. And this is our kind of labyrinth in what we call the secret garden, because we needed to keep the labyrinth originally kind of secret. And when we were in Chartres, we used to start with a canvas there, but it was, don't tell people it's here. And people who stay at the retreat center, the hotelleria, as we say, can use this labyrinth. So good. And here, pilgrimages happen all the time. So this is a youth group who probably are now walking back up to Paris. On the left, I just love that photo. Look at those two women greeting each other. It's just special. It's really special. A lot of that happens in Chartres. Okay, there's Lars pointing out that's right. It's another historical connection, Diana, is that they're celebrating 1,000 years of pilgrimage. So that week, they're probably going to have all sorts of ways of closing it and celebrations, but it's an exhibit on labyrinths. So we've come a long way, believe me. So unlike mere travel, a pilgrimage is a journey into the landscape of the soul. I love that quote, Vivian Hall, and from Whidbey Island. And here's some resources if people want to know more about this. And also, Diana, I want to ask you about a resource of what you would suggest of reading from your work. And we'll put that on our website. But Art of Pilgrimage by Phil Cousineau, a lovely heartfelt book that a lot of people don't know about, Pilgrim Heart by Sarah York. She talks about the processes, the preparation, the arrival, the upheaval, the different stages of pilgrimage. Praying the Labyrinth by Jill Jeffreyon is a lovely, lovely, sweet book. And then Walking a Sacred Path, my book, if you want to know more about the labyrinth and the journey of getting to this place with the labyrinths open around the world. So your thoughts, Diana, anything with that? Or
one of the things that really strikes me is that idea. We think about pilgrimage so much as moving through territory. And to go back to the Niebuhr quote, but it shows up a number of different places in the slideshow. I'm planning on talking about history as a spiritual practice. And I've always understood territory as being more than geographical space.
Yes.
I've always understood territory as being about space and time. And so as a person who was trained as a historian, I'm always taken by the mystery of how space and time intersect with one another. And that is, you can walk into a space, but when you're in that space, you're living in layers of time.
Mm.
where there have been so many people over how many millennia who might have occupied that exact same space. And that all of those stories, in effect, sort of stack on top of one another in geographical space. And so as a young kid, I was always fascinated by that. What happened in this place before I was? And my brother was more of a science fiction buff, and he was always thinking about what will happen in this space after we are. Um,
Uh-huh.
which is another interesting kind of question about space and time. But my heart is always turned towards those ones about the layers that we are
Mhm.
that occupy geography.
And
And so I love learning about different places I go into. I've often had I'm a very intuitive historian. A lot of historians are. I mean, we're we're trained in things like texts and how to look stuff up in all kinds of oddball locations that nobody else would think about to try to discover the stories of the past. But I've always thought one of the better tools of a historian is intuition. Is
yes.
that is to be able to walk into some space and just imagine
Mhm.
what could have been.
Mhm.
And there's been moments when I've been in spaces that have been very powerful. There's a very small Quaker meeting house that's about 50 miles from where I live. It's in a place called Easton, Maryland. And as it happens, that little Quaker meeting house is one of the oldest continuous use church buildings in the United States. It was the meeting itself was established around 1670, and the meeting house was built in 1682, and it has been used as a Quaker meeting ever since then. And it hasn't been changed very much. The last renovation on that building was, I believe, in 1720.
Mhm. Wow.
I know it's a long time to not renovate a building. I mean, they've probably put on a new roof and painted it and stuff, but it's it feels antique. I mean, you walk in and the original door is still there, and it swings open on these really ancient hinges. And when you when it opens, this world of wood, I mean, it's the opposite in some ways of, I think, of Chartres, which is so about windows and space and that vast roof. Well, this is this cozy wooden world with these hundreds of year old benches and this smell that's still there from these really old timbers and clear windows with the milky glass that's wavy. I remember the first time I ever walked in that building, I couldn't say anything.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And finally, my husband, who was with me, said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I feel like I've been here before." And he
Mhm.
said, "Well, we've never been here, as far as we know you." I said, "I know, as far as I've never been here." And but it was really powerful sense of this spirit of connection for me. About
Uh-huh.
3 years later, I was doing work in ancestry work on my own family, which has always been a little bit of a mystery to me. My mom had died, and so I wanted to find out more about my own family. And I'm reading through this stuff on ancestry.com, and it's tells a story about a person who was the first person in my mother's line to come from Europe to the New World, a guy named Andrew Orme, who arrived in what would eventually become the United States, the colony of Maryland, sometime before 1675. And he lived in this area that was Easton, Maryland. And I looked at his wedding certificate and it said that he was married by the Third Haven Quaker meeting in Easton, Maryland. And that was that church, that was that meeting house. And I almost fainted to think that my ancestor had been part of the meeting that built that building some, hundreds of years ago, before Maryland was a state, before the United States was a country. And yet, when I walked in the door, I somehow knew I was part of the story of that place.
Uh-huh. Wonderful. Wow. You probably attended the wedding.
In some way, who knows what was the case. But that kind of sense, I love that story because it was very dramatic, obviously, and it's true. I mean, I was able to track down the genealogy, and I also did the DNA test, and so my DNA actually matches the DNA profile of this whole family that descended from this guy who came from
Oh,
Scotland to the New World, and so I didn't know any of that. But when I
uh,
walked in the door of Third Haven Quaker meeting, I knew something of my story had happened there. And that's one of the things that I think that when we're together, I want to alert people to is that your story occupies a particular space and a particular time. But your story also occupies spaces you don't even know about yet. And there's layers of time that in effect are inhabiting you, even if you're not aware of that.
I think that's very powerful. Yes. Mhm.
And good history is both, knowing stuff about the past and being able to say, hey, that's cool architecture, or I like those paintings, or people once thought XYZ. But there's also this very deep path of spiritual self understanding
Yeah.
that emerges from an encounter with history.
Yes. Yes.
And so when I'm there, I look forward to learning more things about medieval Europe. I've been to Chartres once and had a great experience as a young woman there and just being awed by how beautiful it was. So I look forward to learning things about that, about Chartres, about the history, about the labyrinth.
Mhm.
But I also look forward to the labyrinth being, in effect, a portal for us to walk together
Yes.
into an experience of history where we, even if your history didn't take place, if your family's history didn't take place in that geographical location, which I do not think that mine did. Mine mostly takes place in Scotland and northern England. But even if it's not that specific geography itself, there is a geography that you carry around that you don't know.
That's right. That makes such sense. And that's often people walk into the cathedral and have that sense. I've been here before, or
Yes,
when they're walking the labyrinth, it's almost like it's a portal into the earlier layers of history. Uh,
that's right.
yeah. So that's
And
really, mhm.
and I mean, it sounds mystical, and I guess it is, but I think that history is that it we think of it as a academic discipline, which it is, which I'm skilled at, and you know can write in and do all the professional things. But history is also a an entry point into times that no longer are,
Yeah.
and into the experience of spaces that no longer exist. And so in that sense, I've always thought of it as a having very spiritual, very mystical dimensions. And I think that physicists and other scientists feel this way about their disciplines too. It's not unusual at all to have a physicist, sometimes someone who's into biology or geology, to be able to talk about the mysteries that they encounter in their fields, and even they're rigorous scientists, but things are beyond their explaining fully, when they see their disciplines as pathways into some mystery that is beyond human words. And
Right.
so I think that of history as much the same as physics, but
Uh-huh.
instead of it being a science in that way, it's a storytelling pathway to the mysteries of the past.
Yes, and
And
using your intuition, I think, is a major. I think that that's why your work is so attractive, is that you allow room for, yeah, mystery and imagination, as well as information and really great and tight research, and that you're really. I see you very dogged at getting these details down as much as you can. So, but and also when you describe the new awakening that we really are hoping for, helping, trying to birth, you call it the romantic elements of religion, adventure, quest, I have this list here, mysticism, intuition, wonder, experience, nature, unity, and certainly historical imagination, which I think is what you're talking about now. But
yeah.
those qualities come into your work. And I think that's what's really having it be very attractive to people because it's refreshing. It takes us out of the dogmas and the orthodoxy and points us toward experience and embracing mystery. And I know that's a loaded word with some people, but we're surrounded by mystery, the mystery of creation.
And that does seem like it's a really important, um, I think it's a task for religious institutions in these days. It's to remember that part of who they are. So often religious institutions think, oh, that's what we are. We're an institution. We're the business of religion, or
Uh,
what have you. We have these rules. But ultimately, religion was about the rebinding of the soul, or the restitching of community, and the weaving
yeah,
of time and space between humanity and the divine. And so that idea of binding or holding together, that's the basis of the word religion. So a huge part of that is all these different things that you're talking about. And religious institutions as we know them now have often abandoned that part of their identity in the quest for other things. And yet that those things, imagination, intuition, identity, meaning, purpose, all that stuff, even understanding the way that faith and spirit fit with the natural world, all of those things are obviously longings that people have right now.
yeah.
How can they encounter the more?
Even
What is,
through quantum physics is bringing in this whole new understanding, or perhaps it's not new, but reconnecting us to nature and, the design of creation and all. Yeah, yeah. And also, that's one of my theories. It's a hunch, um, but not uninformed, but a hunch that the reason labyrinths were closed, there was 23 of them throughout the cathedrals in France during the High Middle Ages. And there's only 3 left, and Chartres is one of the 2 in its original form. The other one is so damaged, it feels terrible walking it.
oh, that's
And
sad.
one in Amiens is reconstituted in 1895. But one of the reasons that, with the Enlightenment came in, the imagination and intuition became the stepchildren of the intellect.
Mhm.
And these wonderful tools and other spiritual practices as well, but certainly the labyrinth, I think, just got tossed into the, dustbin of history.
Yep. And it's strange. It's strange that it would. Um, but I mean, I sort of get it from the flow of history, is that anything that smacked of mysticism was seen as medieval. And I
Um,
think that we forget now that the word medieval was a very negative word in the 18th, especially
yeah,
in the 18th century. It's to
yeah,
call something medieval was a real insult. And so people just, the taste changed, and
yeah,
ideas about what constituted an enlightenment shifted.
yeah,
And it's some of that gets reclaimed, obviously, in the 19th century,
Mhm.
but never probably as robustly as it should have been.
And
So,
also the word Gothic, I think, along with medieval,
oh yeah,
Gothic especially is, it's a negative term, and so all of that is being reclaimed in some new way, I feel, and I feel that's what our work is doing at Chart. And in your week, it's called Retracing the Path. The second part is a spiritual practice of reflecting on history. I kind of just reduce that down to history is a spiritual practice.
yeah. That's kind of the way I talk about it. It's
Uh-huh.
just sometimes churches actually ask me to come and talk about history as a spiritual practice. And whenever they want to do that, I get very excited because it opens up a couple of different doors. It opens up that door of self discovery. One of the things that I was just talking about, like with that Quaker meeting house. And I'm going to explore that a lot more in depth when we're together in France. That episode as a kind of a model for how we can do it in our own lives. Um, but it also history as a spiritual practice has some pretty radical sort of implications as well for things like pursuit of the life of justice and the formation of community and um, because when you really understand uh, how people in previous those previous layers of human experience looked at some of the same issues that we're facing today, um, there's a lot of wisdom there
Uh-huh. Yes.
to recover, and there are also mistakes that they made that have
Mhm.
to be overcome. And so learning to do that discernment, I think that active discernment through time to say what did we inherit from our ancestors that has shaped us in negative ways, that we can do better. But what did we inherit from our ancestors that we may have been ignoring, where they got something right and we have never really embraced that fully? And so I love the pathway of discernment, the way that history makes us think what we need to use some very traditional language here, but I think it's language that works especially during Lent. There are things that we need to repent of, um, that still impact us. Sadly enough, that Quaker ancestor got kicked out of the Quaker meeting because he held slaves.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Wow.
So,
Yeah.
so it's like, oh my gosh, I found this place that just felt so like home, and then eventually I found another part of the story, and the other part was my ancestor was a really bad Quaker.
Uh,
It's like, what do you do when you inherit that story? And
yeah.
all of a sudden you're standing not only in the beauty and the mystery of history, but you're also standing in its ambiguity.
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
And at that moment, then you, as the contemporary person, you as the layer that is going on now, you have decisions to make. You have choices about the direction of your life and how your life is adding to this sort of stack of stories through time. And 100 years from now, somebody's standing in the same location and they encounter you. Are they going to see you as more of a hero of the story, or are they going to see you as a person who wasn't very heroic?
Yeah.
And so I think there's really, so history opens itself up to us for spiritual understanding in both the inner life and our lives in the world.
Yes. Yes. Indeed. Indeed. And that it broadens it broadens our understanding of our reason for being here on the planet and the roots that we come from, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I was
So
struck
when I
by
stand in the middle of the labyrinth that's right behind your head there, I'm
uh-huh.
I'm always thinking about everything that's sort of in the layers beneath me,
Yes. Uh-huh.
everything that's grounding me through the center of the labyrinth. And then I'm thinking of almost like my life as a tree of the future and how it's stretching out toward. the world that is to come. And so it's like there's this just profound orientation that I have of my own sort of being in alignment with the center of the earth and the future of
The
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 canopy
rooted,
of grace.
yeah, the rootedness of that. You have this wonderful quote, historians are like mystics. You remember, historians are like mystics as we live our lives in conversation with the past, we write the histories that the people who come after us will build upon.
I wrote that. That's a really
Yeah,
good quote.
I know. When you hear a quote from, yeah, it's really good. You did write that.
I,
Yeah,
I think I've just been explaining that.
yeah, that's exactly why. That's so that I said, that's exactly what this quote says, and that's why people come to Chartres. Often there's this call of there's something I need to find, or maybe there's a former life there, or the richness of the history. Maybe I need to step into that to rediscover where I am and what I stand for. So it's really an important journey for many, many, many people, for sure. So,
So, um,
yeah.
it's really, I find that to be the best place to be making community right now is not with the people who are exactly like you, but the people that you're sitting around a table and listening to the whole big variety of stories.
That's right. That makes sense. And that's a part of what we're gathering in Chart all these many years, is to help people, talk from differences and talk from the same of heart. But basically, everyone is on the same page around, wanting to do better, wake up and do better the next day, and create a better world for us all. So I'm really looking forward to you being in Chart. We'll have some time and all to kind of explore these many issues. So thank you so much for being here.
Well,
Really,
thank you.
yeah. And I
And
encourage.
thanks for inviting me to come. I really, I'm delighted by the invitation. I really look forward to it.
Well, you've been on that list for a long time, and occasionally we've met at Grace Cathedral and said, "Oh yeah, come to Chartres sometime." So we're actually doing it. So that's really helpful. So I encourage people to stay online, and we're going to send Diana off for her evening. But if there's other questions, we'll be glad to answer that. And Dawn has some announcements. So thank you, Diana. You take
You're
care.
welcome.
All right,
Okay,
go in
bye-bye.
peace. Bye-bye. So Dawn, come on in with the announcements. We have other programs happening in Chartres, folks. So go ahead, Dawn.
Yes. If you haven't yet signed up for Diana Butler Bass, June 2nd through June 6th, coming up very soon, please do so right away. Space is becoming limited. So we welcome you, and if you have questions, by all means email contact@veriditas.org, and one of us will get back to you. Also happening in Chartres is a Labyrinth facilitator training that will be co-taught by Lauren Artress and Laura Esculis, one of our faculty. That will be followed by Meeting Mary, about the sacred feminine in Chartres. And I'm going to ask Judith Tripp to say a word or two.
Yeah, thank you for giving me an opportunity, Dawn, just to mention this 2-day workshop. One of the wonderful parts of it is that we get to have another labyrinth walk at the end of our time together. It'll be a Monday and Tuesday after the facilitator training. And we explore on an experiential level as well as a lot of lecture time about just who Mary is at Chartres. They often say that Chartres is Mary's house. And not only Mary, but just the sacred feminine in general, and how that is really writ large in everything that happens at Chartres and our beautiful experiences. So I would really welcome you all to take Diana's class and take off to Paris for a couple of days and come back and join us. It's a lovely time in the cathedral, lots of time to speak to different parts of the cathedral and to really plumb the depths of our own experience of the sacred feminine.
Thank you, Judith. Yes, very special.
Get off now too. Thank you very much, Dawn.
Welcome. Yes, and you know, there's yet one more program after that, but that is advanced facilitator training, who will be able to join the Meeting Mary Labyrinth Walk. So for one of the first times, the advanced training will also include a labyrinth walk in Chartres Cathedral. So it'll be on Tuesday night, and the advanced training is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So, well, I think that's it for now. If there's no more questions, we appreciate you all coming. For everyone who registers, there will be another meeting on Zoom to get you oriented on some of the basic questions about hair dryers and how to get from the airport to Chartres, etc. So watch for that to happen in late April, early May.
Dawn, you also wanted to mention about the 10% difference for Canadians in cost.
Yes, that goes through Diana Butler Bass. So if you are a client of, a follower of Diana Butler Bass, she has a special possibility of a 10% discount to make up for the difference between the Canadian dollar and the US dollar. So let us know, let us know if you're interested in that and you're from Canada.
Great.
All right.
Well, thank you all for being here. I appreciate it, and we're hope to see you in Chartres at some point. And if Diana's week fills, which it probably will quite quickly, there are other programs in September with Brian Thomas Swim, cosmologist, and the week before that is Dermu Omochu, who has written many books on spirituality from Ireland. And so you may want to look up his name. His first book, and quite well-known book, is called Reclaiming Spirituality. So it fits very much into the fact, folks, that there's a spiritual revolution going on. So thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.